When he was 14, his family kicked him out of the house because he was too weak to work. But years later, he was living in the house he inherited from his uncle. Part 1. A harsh beginning. When I was 14, life as I knew it came crashing down around me. Growing up in a small, tight-knit community, everyone knew everyone else's business. My family was no exception. We lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by fields and the occasional neighbor. My father, a stern and hardworking man, expected nothing less than perfection from his children. My mother, a gentle soul, did her best to soften his rough edges, but even she could not shield us from his expectations. I was the youngest of 3 siblings, and by my father's standards, the weakest. My older brother, Mike, was the spitting image of my father, strong, resilient, and dependable. My sister, Sarah, was just as hardworking, helping around the house and fields without complaint. Then there was me, a scrawny, sickly kid who struggled to keep up with the physical demands of farm life. No matter how hard I tried, I always fell short. My father's disappointment in me was palpable. Every time I failed to complete a task or fell behind, he would shake his head in disgust. I could see the frustration in his eyes, hear it in his voice when he told me I was a burden. My mother tried to console me, but her words offered little comfort. The feeling of inadequacy gnawed at my insides, a constant reminder that I was not enough. One day, after a particularly grueling day in the fields, my father called me into the living room. The air was heavy with unspoken tension. My brother and sister stood off to the side, their expressions a mix of pity and relief. My mother sat in her usual chair, her face lined with worry. "Tom," my father began, his voice cold and unyielding, "you're 14 now, old enough to work, to contribute, but you've proven time and again that you're not up to the task. You're too weak, too sickly. We can't afford to carry you any longer." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the room spin around me, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked at my mother, hoping for some sign of support, but she looked away, tears streaming down her face. "You need to leave," my father continued. "Pack your things and go. Maybe out there you'll find a way to toughen up, to become a man." I wanted to protest, to beg for another chance, but the look in his eyes told me it was useless. I was being cast out, discarded like a broken tool. I packed a small bag with what little I had and with a heavy heart, left the only home I had ever known. Part 2. Surviving alone. Leaving home at 14 was terrifying. I had no money, no skills, and no idea where to go. The first few nights, I slept in the nearby woods, the sounds of nocturnal animals and the rustling of leaves my only companions. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, and I quickly realized I needed to find food if I was to survive. I wandered into town, keeping to the shadows, afraid of being seen and reported as a runaway. I scoured trash cans behind restaurants, looking for anything edible. It was not much, but it kept me going. I learned to be resourceful, to use what little I had to survive. I found an old tarp and fashioned it into a makeshift shelter, my new home in the woods. Days turned into weeks, and I became adept at navigating my new life. I found odd jobs here and there, sweeping floors, washing dishes, anything that would earn me a few coins. It was not much, but it was enough to keep me fed and clothed. I kept to myself, avoiding questions about my past. I did not want anyone to know I was alone, a child fending for himself in a world that seemed to care little for my existence. As the months passed, I grew stronger. The hard labor and constant movement did what my father's farm had not. It toughened me up. I was still thin and wiry, but my muscles were becoming more defined, my endurance greater. I learned to live off the land, foraging for berries and hunting small game. I was no longer the weak, sickly boy my father had cast out. I was becoming someone new, someone capable of surviving against the odds. Part 3. An unexpected encounter. One evening, as I was returning to my makeshift shelter, I stumbled upon an old man sitting by a fire. He looked up as I approached, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Evening," he said, his voice gravelly. "You look like you've had a rough time of it." I hesitated, unsure if I should trust him, but something in his gaze made me feel at ease. I nodded and sat down across from him, warming my hands by the fire. "Name's Jack," he said, extending a weathered hand. I shook it, introducing myself simply as Tom. Jack was a wanderer, much like myself. He had been on the road for years, living off the land and doing odd jobs to get by. Over the next few weeks, he taught me everything he knew how to build a proper shelter, how to track animals, how to stay hidden and safe. He became the mentor I never had, a father figure who did not judge me for my past or my shortcomings. Under Jack's guidance, I grew even stronger. I learned to navigate the wilderness with ease, to hunt and fish like a seasoned outdoorsman. My confidence grew, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of purpose. Jack's stories of his travels filled my mind with dreams of adventure, of a life beyond mere survival. But as winter approached, Jack grew ill. The cold and his age were taking their toll. Despite my best efforts to care for him, he passed away one frosty morning, leaving me alone once more. I buried him in the woods he loved so much, marking his grave with a simple cairn of stones. Jack's death was a harsh reminder of the fragility of life, but it also steeled my resolve. I had survived this long, and I would continue to do so, not just for myself, but in memory of the man who had shown me kindness when I needed it most. Part 4. A new opportunity. After Jack's passing, I continued to live off the land, moving from place to place to avoid drawing too much attention. One day, while scavenging near a small town, I overheard a conversation that piqued my interest. A local farmer, Mr. Harris, was looking for help on his farm. The pay was modest, but it came with room and board. Desperate for a stable place to stay, I approached Mr. Harris and offered my services. He eyed me skeptically, but my wiry frame and determined expression seemed to convince him. He agreed to give me a trial period, and I threw myself into the work with a fervor born of necessity. The farm work was hard, but I was no stranger to labor. I rose early and worked until sunset, tending to the animals, plowing fields, and performing whatever tasks Mr. Harris set for me. Slowly, I earned his trust and respect. He saw in me a hard worker, someone who did not shy away from a challenge. Life on the Harris farm was a far cry from my previous existence. I had a roof over my head, regular meals, and a sense of stability. The other farmhands accepted me as one of their own, and I found myself part of a community once again. I kept my past to myself, focusing on the present and the future. As the seasons changed, I felt a sense of accomplishment I had never known before. I was no longer the weak, unwanted boy who had been cast out by his family. I was Tom, a capable young man with a purpose and a place in the world. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Part 5. News from home. One summer day, while working in the fields, a letter arrived for me. It was from my uncle, a man I barely remembered. He had left town years ago under mysterious circumstances and had not been heard from since. The letter was brief and to the point. He was dying and wanted to see me. Curiosity and a sense of duty drove me to visit him. I took a few days off from the farm and made my way to the address he had provided. My uncle lived in a rundown house on the edge of a small town, far from where I had grown up. He was frail and bedridden, his body ravaged by illness. Despite his weakened state, his eyes were sharp and full of emotion as he looked at me. He apologized for his absence and explained that he had been estranged from the family due to a falling out with my father. He had lived a hard life, filled with regrets, but he wanted to make amends before it was too late. To my surprise, he told me that he had no children and wanted to leave his house and all his possessions to me. It was not much, but it was a gesture of goodwill, a chance for a fresh start. I was overwhelmed by his generosity and spent the next few days taking care of him, listening to his stories, and learning about the man he had been. When he passed away, I buried him beside the house he had lived in, marking his grave with a simple wooden cross. His house, a small but sturdy structure, was now mine. I felt a mix of sadness and gratitude, knowing that his last act had given me a place to call my own. Part 6. Building a new life. Returning to the Harris farm, I informed Mr. Harris of my decision to move into my uncle's house. He was understanding and supportive, even offering to help me transport my belongings. With his assistance, I moved into my new home, feeling a sense of independence and responsibility I had never known before. The house needed some work, but it was a place of my own. I spent weeks cleaning, repairing, and making it livable. I found solace in the labor, taking pride in transforming the old, neglected house into a cozy, welcoming home. It was a far cry from the tent in the woods where I had once lived. As I settled into my new life, I continued to work on nearby farms, earning enough to support myself. I made friends with the locals, becoming a part of the community. My past was a distant memory, and I focused on the future, determined to build a life worth living. Part 7. A chance encounter. One day, while shopping for supplies in town, I bumped into a woman named Emily. She was kind and friendly, and we struck up a conversation. She was a teacher at the local school, passionate about her work and the children she taught. We quickly became friends, our shared experiences of hardship and resilience creating a bond between us. Emily introduced me to her friends and invited me to community events. Through her, I became more involved in the town, volunteering at the school and participating in local activities. My once solitary existence was now filled with laughter, friendship, and a sense of belonging. Over time, my feelings for Emily grew stronger. Her kindness, strength, and determination inspired me, and I found myself falling in love with her. To my delight, she felt the same way. Our relationship blossomed, and we began to dream of a future together. Part 8. Facing the past. As my life with Emily grew happier, memories of my past began to resurface. I had buried the pain of my family's rejection deep within me, but now it demanded to be acknowledged. Emily encouraged me to confront my past, to seek closure and healing. One autumn day, I decided to visit my childhood home. The journey was filled with mixed emotions, fear, anger, and a longing for resolution. When I arrived, the house looked much the same, but the people within had changed. My father had grown old and frail, no longer the stern figure who had cast me out. My mother's health had deteriorated, and she looked tired and worn. Mike had taken over the farm, and Sarah had married and moved away. They were surprised to see me, their expressions a mix of shock and guilt. We sat down to talk, and I shared my journey, the struggles, the hardships, and the triumphs. My father apologized, his voice filled with regret. He admitted that he had been wrong to cast me out, that he had let his pride and expectations cloud his judgment. My mother wept, holding my hand and begging for forgiveness. In that moment, I realized that forgiveness was not just for them, but for myself as well. Holding on to anger and resentment had weighed me down for too long. I forgave them, not just for their sake, but to free myself from the past. It was a cathartic release, a healing of old wounds. Part 9. A fresh start with the past. Behind me, I returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. Emily and I continued to build our life together, planning for the future. We decided to get married, a small but joyous celebration with our friends in the community. Our home became a place of warmth and love, filled with laughter and the promise of a bright future. We worked together to make it even better, planting a garden, fixing up the barn, and creating a space where we could raise a family. Part 10. Overcoming challenges. Life was not without its challenges. We faced financial difficulties, unexpected setbacks, and personal struggles. But we faced them together. Our love and commitment to each other gave us the strength to overcome whatever obstacles came our way. Emily's passion for teaching inspired me to get more involved in the community. I volunteered at the school, helping with maintenance and supporting the students. It was fulfilling work, and I found joy in giving back to the community that had welcomed me. Part 11. Growing together. As the years passed, our bond grew stronger. We supported each other through thick and thin, our love a constant source of strength and comfort. We faced life's ups and downs together, always finding a way to come out stronger on the other side. We also made new friends and deepened our connections with old ones. Our home became a gathering place for friends and family, filled with laughter, love, and shared memories. It was a far cry from the lonely existence I had once known. Part 12. A new arrival. One spring, Emily and I received the joyous news that we were expecting a child. The anticipation and excitement of becoming parents filled our days with hope and happiness. We prepared our home for the new arrival, creating a nursery and making sure everything was ready for the baby. The day our child was born was the happiest of our lives. Holding our newborn son in my arms, I felt a surge of love and protectiveness unlike anything I had ever experienced. We named him Jack, in honor of the man who had shown me kindness and taught me how to survive. Part 13. Parenthood. Parenthood brought its own set of challenges and joys. We navigated sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the constant worry that comes with being new parents. But we also experienced the profound joy of watching Jack grow and discover the world around him. Emily and I worked together as a team, supporting each other and sharing the responsibilities of parenthood. Our love for Jack deepened our bond and brought us even closer together. We reveled in the small moments, the first smiles, the first steps, and the sound of his laughter filling our home. Part 14. Passing on knowledge. As Jack grew older, I shared with him the skills and knowledge I had learned from my own journey. I taught him how to build a fire, how to navigate the woods, and the importance of resilience and perseverance. Emily instilled in him a love of learning and the value of kindness and compassion. We wanted to give Jack the best of both worlds, the strength and independence to face life's challenges, and the love and support of a close-knit family. Watching him grow into a confident and caring young boy filled us with pride and joy. Part 15. A visit from the past. One day, out of the blue, my brother Mike visited us. He had heard about our life from mutual acquaintances and wanted to reconnect. We sat down and talked, catching up on the years we had been apart. Mike apologized for the way he had treated me when we were young, expressing his regret for not standing up for me. Our conversation was a step towards healing old wounds. We did not become best friends overnight, but it was a start. We agreed to stay in touch, to build a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. It was a reminder that people can change, and that forgiveness and reconciliation are possible. Part 16. a thriving community. Our involvement in the community deepened over the years. Emily continued to teach, inspiring and guiding her students. I took on more responsibilities, helping with community projects and supporting local initiatives. We became pillars of the community, known for our kindness, generosity, and hard work. Our home was a place of welcome and refuge for those in need. We opened our doors to friends, neighbors, and even strangers who needed a helping hand. It was our way of giving back, of honoring the kindness we had received and paying it forward. Part 17. A Legacy of Love. As the years went by, our family grew. Jack thrived, becoming a bright and compassionate young man. We had more children, each bringing their own unique joy and challenges. Our home was filled with love, laughter, and the sounds of a growing family. Looking back, I could see how far I had come. From a scared, weak boy cast out by his family, I had built a life filled with love, purpose, and fulfillment. My journey had been long and arduous, but it had shaped me into the man I had become. I was grateful for the hardships, the lessons learned, and the people who had helped me along the way. My life was a testament to the power of resilience, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And as I looked at my family and the life we had built together, I knew that I had found my true home.